speak about that subject. Labor Day was started back in 1885. 1885. It's been around for a long time, Labor Day. And the original intention, as you turn to Proverbs 14, verse 23, the original intention of Labor Day was to honor the laboring men and women who built our country. We have to remember that. The men and women of this labor built this country. The government didn't build this country. It's the laboring men and women. And so we have these holidays during the course of the year that recognize. Mother's Day recognizes mothers, and Father's Day, fathers, and next week is National Grandparents' Day. We recognize grandparents and their contribution. President's Day of the presidents, but I like Labor Day in that it recognizes the average man, woman whose labor has contributed over the years to this great country. And what a great time to be alive here in 2018 when we just get to kind of ride quite smoothly on the hard labor that men and women put into this nation for hundreds of years. I was reading a book on the history of Joseph Bennett, who started our church over in Evans. It was the First Baptist Church of Evans. Now we call it Hilltop Baptist Church. For 188 consecutive years, perpetually, there has been a Baptist church on that little hilltop over in Angola, and he started it. He was a deacon, Joseph Bennett. He's famous for Bennett Beach and Bennett Road, and that's what he's famous for. But he was the minister of Christian education at the First Baptist Church all of his life. And he lived a long time, up into his 90s. And he really cared about people, cared about souls, and cared about children. But they wrote a book about him, and he talked in that book about just travel in that day when he was one of the first settlers of Evans. And Evans was Eden. I don't know if you knew this or not, but Eden used to go from our eastern border over there all the way to Lake Erie. And then they chopped off a part of Eden and made it Evans. It used to go all the way to the lake. And now in 2021, about 3 years from now, Evans will be 200 years old. Joseph Bennett talked about in the history about how bad the roads were and how sometimes, a lot of times, they're just what they would do is as the horse carriages came down and got sunk in the mud, people would run out and kind of lift up, get around the carriages and lift them up while the horses pulled them, and then they'd get them on the dry ground, and that's how you traveled back then. It's a little better now. And he talked about one of the worst things he used to have to do in his business was to go from what we call Evans today down to Versailles, New York, and he had to travel on a road called Versailles Plank Road. And it was called that because it was literally made of planks of wood. And he said it was like jarring your teeth. All your teeth would loosen up as you went down the road. He called it the worst road around. Well, I take that road almost every day of my life home, and it's a blessing now. And if you learn some of this history, you learn not to complain about potholes. All right. We shouldn't be complaining right about now. We have these wonderful roads and bridges and underpasses and street signs and street lights and all kinds of things that really make driving pretty much out here in the country a pleasure. And this was all built by the labor of men and women. And you think of the telephone poles everywhere, big wires bringing electricity to your house. That was hard work. That was hard work. All the water systems we have, sewage systems we have under the ground, and that was hard work. And the automobiles we came to church in today are the best they've ever been. As they keep perfecting and perfecting and perfecting them. And vans, and we think of the goods that have been brought to our house by trains, ships, airplanes, automobiles, vans, whatever. We're just kind of at the climax of all this. If we knew how much labor it went into bringing us our breakfast this morning from the farms, the hard work of the farmers. Some of you were farmers. Thank God for farmers, amen? That's labor. That's work. And then they got to, till the ground and disc it and plant and fight off the weeds all year long and then harvest it and get it on trucks and then get it to the market and get it into trains and semi-trucks and get it to Wegmans, or Tops or Walmart or wherever you shop. And then, boy, you go there and it's kind of like nothing. Now Walmart says, hey, we'll do it for you. Just call us, tell us what you want. We'll have it all ready for you as soon as you just stop by at groceries. They're saying that now. Just stop in, put it in your car for you. Just pay us. And, man, all this was built, brethren, by labor. Hard work. And men and women who the last few centuries just always had that spirit about them, that they wanted to leave their country and their communities and their churches better than when they took them over, when they started. Boy, they've done a good job at it. And it is labor that has built our churches, labor that has built our communities, and labor that has built our country. And thank God for laboring men and laboring women. And so I get, sometimes I guess a little bit annoyed when I hear complaining in this country. There was a judge once who wrote an editorial to a newspaper in New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire. Though it doesn't give his name here, but this was back in the 60s, I think, maybe the 70s, because if he wrote it today, he'd probably be booted off the bench. But he says this, and I'll just read it. He says, we hear often the complaint of the youth, what can we do? Where can we go? Not all youth, but some. The answer is clear. Go home. Hang the storm windows. Paint the woodwork. Rake the leaves. Mow the lawn. Wash the car. Learn to cook. Scrub the floors. Repair the sink. Build a boat. Get a job. Help the pastor. Help some charity. Visit the sick. Assist the poor. Study your lessons, and when you're through and not too tired, read a book. Your parents do not owe you entertainment. Your city or town does not owe you recreational facilities. The world does not owe you a living. You owe the world something. You owe the world your time and your energy and your talent so that no one will be at war, in poverty, sick, or lonely again. In plain, simple words, grow up. Quit being a crybaby. Get out of your dream world and develop a backbone, not a wishbone, and start acting like a man or a lady. You're supposed to be mature enough to accept some of the responsibility your parents have carried for years. They have nursed you, protected you, helped you, appealed to you, begged you, excused you, tolerated and denied themselves needed comfort so that you could have every benefit. You have no right to expect them to bow to your every whim and fancy. In heaven's name, grow up and go home. That's pretty good. I don't know how long he'd last on the bench today. If he would say that, he'd probably offend a lot of people and hurt a lot of feelings, a lot of little feelings. And, I wish he would say it again. And again, because that's pretty good stuff. Said the little red rooster, believe me, things are tough. Seems that worms are scarcer, and I cannot find enough. What's become of all those fat ones is a mystery to me. There were thousands through the rainy spell, but now where can they be? Then the old brown hen was who heard him, didn't grumble or complain. She had gone through a lot of dry spells. She had lived through floods and rain. So she flew up to the grindstone and she gave her claws a whet. W-H-E-T, that means a sharpening. And she said, I've never seen the time there weren't worms to get. She picked a new and undug spot. The earth was hard and firm. The little rooster jeered, new ground? That's no place for a worm. But the old brown hen just spread her feet. She dug, both fast and free. I must go to the worms, she said. The worms won't come to me. The rooster vainly spent his day, through habit, by the ways where fat roundworms had passed in squads back in the rainy days. When nightfall found him supperless, he growled in accents rough, I'm hungry as a fowl can be, conditions sure are tough. He turned then to the old brown hen and said, it's worse with you, for you're not only hungry, but must be tired too. I rested while I watched for worms, so I feel fairly perk. But how are you? Without worms too, and after all that work. The old brown hen popped to her perch and dropped her eyes to sleep and murmured in a drowsy tone, young man, hear this and weep. I'm full of worms and happy, for I've eaten like a pig. The worms are always there as always, but boy, I had to dig. And there's a little bit of wisdom there from that hen. She just kept digging, and she found worms. No complaining. If you want to get a favor done by some obliging friend and want a promise, safe and sure, on which you can depend, don't go to him who always has much leisure time to plan. But if you want your favor done, just ask the busy man. The man with leisure never has a moment he can spare. He's always putting off until his friends are in despair. But he whose every working hour is crowded full of work forgets the art of wasting time. He cannot stop to shirk. So when you want a favor done and want it done right away, go to the man who constantly works 20 hours a day. He'll find a moment, sure, somewhere that has no other use and fix you while the idle man is framing his excuse. That's pretty good, too. And that's true. Just find the busiest person you can, and they'll find a way to get it done. Find the laziest person, and they'll have an excuse for why they can't do it. We are blessed as we think of labor today and the labor of men and women who have built our country, communities, and churches. Over in my town, we have a little plaque this big by a house next to Tops. It's the household of Willis Carrier. It's where he grew up, Willis Carrier. And Willis Carrier invented air conditioning. Air conditioning. He was educated at J.T. Waugh. We go there. It used to be the old high school. We go there in Bible clubs. That's where he got his education, and then he used the mind God gave him to work. And boy, he worked and he worked and he worked, and he finally figured out a way to get the humidity out of air and cool it down and blow it around. Call that air conditioning. Now it's in buildings all over the world, cars all over the world. He has been a blessing to the human race by his labor. That's an extreme example, but you and I can be a blessing to the human race too by our labor. In some way, doing something of redeeming value to help the human race. I'd like us to look at some scriptures today about labor. If you'll turn, first of all, to the book of Exodus, chapter 20, and verse number 9. We'll come back to Proverbs in a moment, so you might want to keep your place there. There's a lot of verses about labor. right here in the midst of the Ten Commandments, when God is literally speaking audibly to the congregation. It's the first time and only time a congregation heard God speak audibly. In the midst of all the don'ts, he said these words in Exodus 20 and verse 9, 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. 6 days shalt thou labor. We have a commandment to labor, and with that commandment comes a whole lot of benefits. We'll talk about a few of them this morning that come to a laboring man or a laboring woman. And I want to encourage you to get the biblical philosophy of labor today, because there is tremendous efforts in our nation today trying to indoctrinate people with socialism and trying to indoctrinate people even with communism. And for you young adults that are here this morning and teens, I want to especially warn you about the word free. When someone stands up and says, we're going to give you free education, free college, free university, free health care, boy, that makes somebody who hasn't thought things through yet to rush to the ballot box and vote for that person. But there's nothing free. That's called socialism. And it sounds good, but what they're not telling you is that we're going to make it free for you, because we're going to be reaching deep into the pockets of those who have worked hard for decades before you and built this country, and we're going to take their money and we're going to give it to you. And they're going to literally, in that sense, punish hard work and labor and free market capitalism, and punish those who have labored and worked and prospered to give you things that are free. Now, you don't have to look far in human history to know that socialism has always failed. It has always failed everywhere it has ever been tried, most recently in Venezuela. 10 years ago, approximately 10 years ago, plus or minus, but about 10 years ago, Venezuela was the richest country in Central America. Today, people are fleeing that country at about 100,000 a year just to try to find someplace they can go and get some food. Because Chavez and those that went in with him said, we're going to switch this country to a socialistic country. And today it is an absolute wreck. Socialism destroyed that country in about 10 years. If you want to study it out, I don't want to get onto it, but it has just about destroyed every country where it's ever been tried. It has never worked. God says, if a man does not work, neither should he eat. That's what the Bible says. That's what the Bible says. In the old days, people used to study the Bible. One of the problems and why we're falling for these, I want to call them delusions more than philosophies. They are delusional. For anyone at this point in history who still thinks that would work, it's delusional. But I believe it's showing our biblical illiteracy in America. And as less and less people read the Bible, and less people see the benefit of labor, manual labor, mental labor in some people's cases nowadays, and they don't see the benefit of it, they do get, for some reason, the idea like the world owes them something. And they fall for these philosophies. And they line up to vote for these people, and then it's a long time later when they realize, boy, this just didn't work. This didn't work. What does the Bible say? Turn to Psalm 104, verse 23. We're talking about labor today, and we might be talking about what some people call the realm of secular labor, which I'll show you really is not secular for the believer in Jesus Christ. We've got our spiritual labor to do also for God, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm talking about getting a job and working hard at that job. In Psalm 104, it just makes this kind of statement of observation. Keep in mind, this was written about 3,000 years ago, and it just simply says these words in Psalm 104, verse 23, "Man goeth forth unto his work, and to his labor until the evening." That's it, just makes a statement. But I just want you to know that what we do today is not that much different than what they were doing 3,000 years ago. They just knew this is what God wants them to do. You go forth to your labor till the evening. Now, some people do nowadays have to work swing shifts and night shifts, and we understand that. You got to have that in healthcare, nursing homes, hospitals. You got to have that in public service like policemen. You got to have somebody out there at night. But mostly, man goeth to his work, goeth forth unto his work, and to his labor until the evening. That's pretty much just the way it's been for millennia. It's nothing new. There's just something inside a man that knows I should work. Now, I do want to put a disclaimer in here as we turn to Psalm 128. This is a great psalm for Labor Day, Psalm 128. We understand as Christians that there are people who have emotional maladies, mental maladies, physical maladies, diseases, disabilities that they're honestly disabilities. We understand that. We understand that there are people who need help. And that government, churches, and charities should help such people. Absolutely. We understand that. It may be you or me that has an accident next and becomes disabled. And it is our Christian foundation in our past history that has developed ideas like welfare, which were wonderful ideas at first. Let's help these people get on their feet till they get on their feet, and then get your hands off of them and let them run their race. Let them take off. I'm glad we live in a country like that. But of course, we know there's been tremendous misuse of that by some. And we're against that. But we're for helping the poor. We're for helping the disabled, the diseased. And we don't quite understand all the things some people are going through emotionally and mentally, but they're debilitating and they oftentimes cannot hold on to it. We understand that. And our Christianity makes us want to help these people for a time. And sometimes it's for all time. I mean, there's some people born with physical disabilities, mental retardations, or whatever, and we have to almost help them a whole life. We understand that. We're Christians. We have love. We have charity. But for the person who's healthy enough to work and doesn't, we believe the scriptures also teach that if they don't work, they shouldn't eat. They shouldn't eat. And so as a church, I know we're not a big church, but we've always tried to pray people into jobs. And most people here are employed, hardworking, and encourage them to be good testimonies at their place of work and to leave the results in God's hands. And as we're going to see from some scriptures here, God blesses that. Now, we may have a Job experience where he tests our faith and we lose everything. They have to start over. That happens too. But for the most part, God blesses labor. And I'm glad we have a Labor Day. I don't want to read the whole psalm, but you can. Psalm 128, 1 and 2 says, "Blessed is everyone that feareth the Lord, that walketh in his ways. For thou shalt eat the labor of thine hands. Happy shalt thou be. It shall be well with thee." So as a person fears the Lord and walks in his ways, they will be a laborer. They will labor with their hands, and it will produce an element of happiness in them. Turn to Proverbs 10. Proverbs is a great book for especially young people to read, and it will combat some of these isms and philosophies that are being crammed down your throat these days that sound so good. But there's a difference between Christianity and communism. Please understand that. Communism says, what's yours is mine, and I'm going to take it. Christianity says, what's mine is yours, and I'm going to give it. And I'm going to help you wherever I can. They're complete opposites, so don't let people tell you they're not. Proverbs 10, verse 16 says, the labor of the righteous tendeth to life, the fruit of the wicked to sin. So labor brings happiness, we've seen. Labor brings life. That word life is kind of a word about revival. It makes a person feel that they're alive. Their labor helps them feel alive. In chapter 13, verse number 11, Proverbs, wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase. Now, we don't teach a health, wealth, and prosperity gospel around here, but we just teach that in general, if you follow God's principles and you labor and you're wise with what you earn and you pay your debts and you pay your bills and you don't live extravagantly and you live humbly and you're content with food and raiment, basically you're going to increase. You're going to increase. Usually it helps a person, and I look at some of you in your 20s just getting started, and you don't have anything. You don't have 2 nickels to rub together, and you may look at some of us like in our 60s and 70s and how much we have, but keep in mind, all of us were in your shoes one day. But we trusted God's ways, and we worked, and we labored, and God showed himself to us that he's not affected by the economy. He's not affected by inflation. He's not affected by recessions or depressions or anything. But God rules and reigns in the affairs of every single person who obeys his principles. And if you obey his principles of laboring and not coveting and not being greedy and being frugal and being prudent and all those other things you find in the book of Proverbs, you're going to eventually increase. And you will someday, in most cases, have what we have someday. And it'll bring you some happiness. It'll bring you some increase. It'll bring you some satisfaction. Look at chapter 14, verse 14. The backslider in heart is filled with his own ways. Let's forget about him. And a good man shall be satisfied from himself. A good man will be satisfied from himself. A good man who's obeying the Lord's work. I'll read this to you. Let me read a New Testament equivalent to Proverbs 14:14. There's always one. It's amazing how the Bible just connect the dots, man. No matter what the subject, and you can connect the dots through the Bible. Galatians 6:4 says, but let every man prove his own work, and then shall he have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another. He has rejoicing in himself, not pride in himself. Pride's a horrible sin. But he rejoices. He rejoices in himself as he works and as he's wise with what God gave him, and he pays his bills, and he's honest. He doesn't get wealth by, what was that one verse there? Wealth gotten by vanity. He doesn't work under the table. He doesn't cheat on his taxes. He doesn't steal. That kind of wealth will be diminished. The old saying, crime doesn't pay. Be sure your sin will find you out. We have even politicians going to jail for those things. It all catches up on you. But if you do it honestly, God will bless you. God will bless you. You don't get wealth by vanity. You don't steal. But you labor. And God will bless you, and God will give you the increase. God will give you joy, happiness, satisfaction. You'll have rejoicing in yourself. You know, I call it a little patch of land, our little patch on earth. You look at the sky, from the sky, you can't even see it, but God gives us these little patches of earth, and let's have them. And we get to own property, and we have a little house and a little shed on there, and it satisfies you. It can be a blessing. Someday some of you are going to know what I mean. I was over at Mike and Jen's house yesterday. They got a nice little patch of land, God's bless them. And I think if you talk to them, that probably blesses their heart, just to go there and look around sometimes and say, wow, look what God gave us. They're not proud about it. They're humble. But they've done things right in God's eyes for a long time. And they're to that stage where they can enjoy the fruits of their labor. The old timers used to say, God helps them who help themselves. What does that mean? That means those that say, I'm not going to depend on others, I'm not depending on the government, I'm going to depend on God, I'm going to work hard. God helps some people. He does. He helps us a whole lot more than we even recognize or give him the credit for. In Proverbs 21 and verse number 25, the desire of the slothful killeth him, for his hands refuse to labor. He coveteth greedily all the day long, but the righteous giveth and spareth not. There's another thing about labor. It gives you the opportunity to give and not spare. And I can't tell you what a blessing giving is. It makes you feel good. I don't know how that works, but it works. When you give and you help other people, you help the church, you help missionaries, you help the poor, it makes you feel good. And so you work, you pay your bills, you stay out of debt, or you get out of debt, and you live prudently, and you enjoy a few things God's given you on earth. And as we're going to see in a minute, you don't labor to get rich. That's not the reason. But sometimes, you know, these people who are humble and they don't labor to get rich, sometimes God makes them rich because he can trust them with it. He can trust them with it. And then they're a blessing to a lot of other people. A lot of other people. And they're able to give. But the slothful guy here, he just kind of, his desire just kills him. He covets greedily all the day and he never has nothing. Fight slothfulness. Fight laziness. Fight being a sluggard. There's some people, I don't understand it, but some people come out of the womb and they're just full of energy. Man, they just like doing things. Other people come out of the womb and they just lay there. And I don't know why that is. I don't understand some of these things, but if you are prone to being slothful or lazy or a sluggard, I'm not trying to offend you or anything, you need to fight that temptation as much as an alcoholic has to fight the temptation to drink. I'm serious. Laziness is the great blockade to blessings. It's the great blockade to blessings is being lazy. You know, this world is filled with atheists and agnostics. They don't even know it, but they live by God's principles, and God blesses them. Now, they'll never acknowledge God, but they're honest, they're hardworking, they're diligent, they're they have one speed, and that's fast. And boy, they do well. Because God blesses his principles for anyone who will live by them. Whether we give him the glory or not, God always honors his word and his principles. And if you by nature are lazy, I want to encourage you to fight that temptation as much as anything and be diligent and let God bless you, and you'll have satisfaction. Man, where's the time going? Turn to Colossians 3. I'm skipping verses in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes that just talk about our labor and our wife and our home and how God has put that in our hearts, and that's our blessing, and to give and help others. And there's a bunch of scriptures I'm skipping here, but in Colossians, I think, in my opinion, this is the greatest text in all the New Testament that shows us the value of labor. And I call this getting paid twice. Some of you heard my sermon, getting paid twice. It's about labor. See, some of you think you have a secular job and Pastor Cole has a sacred job. I want to say to you that if you are in God's will where you work, your job is just as sacred as my job is. according to the scriptures. I'm going to show it to you in a minute. And I want to encourage you to work. And you young people, man alive. I remember, I don't want to get off track here, but I remember a lady. She's still running. She's from Ethiopia. She set 3 world records. Remember her? I talked about her once, I think. She never won a gold, but she's got a silver once, but she set 3 world records for long distance running. And she made a statement. If some of you young people could adapt this statement, not in running, but into your life, into whatever you do, especially into your spirituality. She said these words. She said, I will do today what others will not do, so I can do tomorrow what others cannot do. That is profound. And she applied that to running, and she set 3 world records so far. But what she's saying in her realm is, I'm going to run more, I'm going to work more, I'm going to practice harder than anybody else. I am going to do what nobody else will do. So tomorrow I'll be able to do what nobody else can do. And boy, you take that into your youth, you teens and you 20s, and you start putting that towards your labor and towards your Christianity and towards your spirituality. And man, when you get to be 50 or 60 or 70, you are going to eat the fruit of that. And you're going to be blessed, unless God tries you like a Joseph or a Job. We know he does that sometimes. Man, do today what others won't do. Save money, work hard, be there at work early, stay late, do more than the boss asks you to do. And pretty soon you'll be rising and rising and rising while others are quitting and trying another job and so on. And you'll be in management or whatever. And God, I don't know if that all happened, but God will bless you. And you do that, and then when you're up in years, you're going to be able to do things that others won't be able to do. And all labor there is profit. That's the name of the sermon, if I didn't tell you that. We got to close, though. 2 more texts. This one here, I love this. I call this the laborers or the workman's text. Colossians 3, beginning at verse 22. Servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh. Let me paraphrase. Employees, do everything your employers according to the flesh tell you to do. Not with eye service as men pleasers. In other words, not just when they're watching you. Don't be one of those laborers that goes to work and, boy, when their eyes are on you, you're working like crazy. You are like crazy when they're not watching you. But in singleness of heart, fearing God, and whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. You see, your secular job is just as sacred as mine is. So, well, he's in the ministry. He's working for God. No, it says right here, you're working for God. And whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. And here's the payoff right here. This is great. Getting paid twice, I call this. Knowing that of the Lord you shall receive the reward of the inheritance. For you serve Christ. What is the reward of the inheritance? Again, I don't know. There's a lot of things about heaven I don't know, but I know it's something because God said it. I believe it means you'll be a joint heir with Christ. In other words, whatever is his will be yours someday. But that's what I call getting paid twice. If you go to your quote-unquote secular job every day, and you do it as unto the Lord, at the end of the week, your employer will give you a paycheck. At the end of your life, God will give you a paycheck. The reward of inheritance. You'll get paid twice. All depends on your attitude. We ought to be the best laborers we can be at our place of work. Do more than we're asked to do. And God will bless you for that. A tourist who visited, by the way, as I'm reading this story, turn to Deuteronomy 8. We're going to end there. I think, like finally, Paul used to say. A tourist who visited an exquisite garden on one of the lovely estates in Italy wrote the following account of his conversation with the caretaker of that lovely estate and gardens. "How long have you been here?" he asked. 25 years. "And how often has the owner been to see the estate?" 4 times. "When did he come last?" 12 years ago. "He writes to you, I suppose?" "Never." "From whom do you get your orders?" "From him in Milan." Or from the steward, rather, in Milan. "Does he come here often?" "Never." "Who comes then to look after things?" "I'm left pretty much alone. Very seldom do I see any strangers." "Yet you keep the garden so spick and span that one would think you were expecting the owner to come tomorrow." "Today, sir. Today." "That's good. No, I'm not expecting him tomorrow. I'm keeping it because I'm expecting him today." Today. Boy, that's how we ought to live with the Lord coming soon. We got to work for the Lord to do too, and I'm not preaching on that today. But I'm trying to tell you, your secular labor is sacred. And your secular labor, listen, it is building this country. It is building our community, and it is building our churches. And the laboring man and the laboring woman ought to be honored. And that's why we have Labor Day. But now I want to get to the most important text, and then we'll pray. This is the most important text to keep the whole thing in perspective. So if you need to wake up now and at least get this. Deuteronomy 8, verse 11. As I'm reading this, he's talking to Israel, but it sounds like America. It sounds like he's talking to us. Listen, it says this: "Beware that thou forget not the Lord thy God, in not keeping his commandments and his judgments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, lest when thou hast eaten and art full, and hast built goodly houses, and dwelt therein, and when thy herds and thy flocks multiply, and thy silver and thy gold is multiplied, and all that thou hast is multiplied." Boy, that sounds like today. "Then thine heart be lifted up," that's called pride, "and thou forget the Lord thy God, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage." Then it talks about how he led them, verse 15. Verse 16, he fed them, he humbled them to prove them. Verse 17, "And thou say in thine heart, my power and the might of mine hand hath gotten me this wealth. But thou shalt remember the Lord," verse 18. "For it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth." You got to remember the Lord. Some of you are doing very well. God has blessed the work of your hands. But we got to remember the Lord. We have eaten and we are full. We dwell in goodly houses, and everything we've had in this country has multiplied. But he warns us, don't let your heart get lifted up right there in pride. And this Labor Day, we need to remember the Lord, that it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth. Any one of us could become disabled just like that. We live, our mobility, our mental state is all from God. I'm not discounting how hard some of you work. It's amazing. It's amazing. But we are laborers together with God. You go to work with God every day. God needs somebody in every factory, every business, every school, every college, every hospital. Just like he needs a pastor in every town, he needs workers in every place being a testimony for Jesus Christ where they work. A witness. A witness. This Labor Day, let us remember in closing, God's been good to our nation. And let's at least give an over-the-shoulder glance of gratitude back towards the pioneers who made this nation great. Boy, they worked. And they worked with God. And God blessed them. And we are the recipients of their blessing. Let's not be among the complainers or the protesters. Let's just every day raise our hands and say, thank you, God, for letting me live here. Thank you, Lord. You glad you're not in North Korea today? You glad you're not in Venezuela today? Or Argentina? Or Vietnam? Wow, we're blessed. I think little is much when God is in it. That's a good song. Maybe we'll sing that one. What is that, 8? Something?